to this week's virtual training session about safety data sheets and how important they are to you when working in the field. It's most of the federal regulations. There are state, local, other things like NFPA, NEC, and EPA. But OSHA's purpose is to preserve the health and safety of workers in every private organization across the country. Things we're required to make sure everybody understands is hazardous communication. In the top 10 violations that OSHA tracks every year, hazardous communication is there because people are not educated or not trained about what the HAZCOM standards are. So for years, companies got away with having people work with chemicals, solutions, and whatever, and never telling them what were the hazards, what sort of health hazards they posed, irritation, sensitization, carcinogenicity, other physical hazards like flammability, corrosion, or reactivity. Back in 1980s, they came up with the hazardous communication standard. Now, hazardous materials, any item which could be biological, chemical, or physical, which have the potential to cause harm to humans, animals, or the environment, either by itself or through interaction with other factors. So we're going to talk about the safety data sheets, formerly known as the material safety data sheets, MSDS. Today, after 2014, they switched over to a more modern method where everything is in a 16-section format. Once upon a time, when you looked at the MSDS, if it was 3M, they might have personal protection equipment on page 2. Then you'd get something from Dow, and PPE would be on page 5. So this eliminates this confusion, keeps everything in a nice, organized manner. Breach of the HAZCOM rules that OSHA picks on people about is not having proper labeling on containers. So as you can see here on the 55-gallon barrel, we can see a nice big red tag saying that it's possibly can burn. But over on the left, the labeling's not so definitive, and people could be guessing about what the hazards are. Every container should be labeled. There should be a name, an identifier, what this product is, what the general hazards are in a statement. Picture symbols, pictograms that let you know what the hazards are. Never trust a non-labeled container. This is another OSHA offense. Now, you can pour something into an unlabeled container if you're the one that's going to be using it, and you are going to dispose of it or return it to the bigger container at the end of the shift. We have to keep the safety data sheets on file. Before 2014, we had to have a book that everybody was going to have access to if they wanted to look up a chemical. That's changed now. We can now do this online, and 24/7 you can go to veritanet.com and look up any chemical that we might be using in the field. Now, when we bring a new chemical into the workplace, we have to file that safety data sheet, and we must keep it on file for 30 years, just in case there are any lingering hazards that maybe we didn't know about when we brought it onto the workplace. So we also need to make sure that you're trained anytime that we bring a new chemical into the workplace. We should have a talk about it and what the hazards are and what you need to do to protect yourself. Every bottle, there should be a GHS satisfactory label. 5 things that need to be on this label are: 1, the identifier. What is this chemical? Number 2 is signal words. That tells us about the level of danger. So the 2 words for signal words are danger or warning. Again, warning, be careful with it. Danger, yes, this could hurt you. Then there is a hazard statement. What kind of harm this chemical could cause? It could cause, if ingested, it may cause you to burn your stomach. It may cause you to throw up. It may have other hazards that can build up. Then we have to have a pictogram. Now, a pictogram is a way of expressing what the hazards are without using words. So we bypass any need for translating into different languages. Then also we need a precautionary statement. What do we need to do to be safe around this chemical? In some cases, we may need good ventilation. In other cases, it's going to say, do not use near open flame. Parts to a basic GHS compliant label. So what we're talking about here is N-propyl alcohol. Number 2, the signal word is danger. A hazard statement is 3. Highly flammable liquid and vapor can cause serious eye damage. And who knew this? But alcohol may cause drowsiness or dizziness. Number 4 is a precautionary statement. Keep away from heat, sparks, open flames, hot surfaces. No smoking, avoid breathing the fumes, yada, yada, yada. If it gets in your eyes, rinse cautiously with water for several minutes. Now, when you do get a chemical in the eye, remember, be overly cautious. Keep flushing for a while. You may have a little bit left tucked in there somewhere that you don't feel right away, but you don't want to have to go back after it a second time. And always remove contact lenses if they're present. And number 5, where you can contact the manufacturer. So here they have the phone number, the address. Of course, we'll be more worried about the phone number. We don't have to worry about when it was bottled, when it was made. None of that's important. Here are the pictograms that are going to be on the label. The first one we see in the top left is an oxidizer, meaning this is something that could supply oxygen to the situation, which means things are going to be more flammable. And then, of course, we do have flames, things that are burnable, pyrophorics, things that can burst into flame when exposed to air. Luckily, we don't have any of that. Over on the far right, explosives. That's pretty self-explanatory in itself. And so is the skull and crossbones. Highly toxic, acute toxicity. Then you see corrosion right in the center square. This means it's harmful to skin or other materials. Gas cylinders, as you can guess, these are under high pressure and we need to treat them carefully. Then on the bottom left, we have health hazards. Is it a carcinogen? Is it a mutagen? Reproductive toxicity. This happened in a battery factory. We'll talk more about that later. But women wanted to work in the area where they were actually putting the lead into the batteries, but it was a reproductive toxin. And so they wouldn't let women in there, but they fought for the right to do this, and they made the standards a lot more stringent. And then we have the environment. So we could have aquatic toxicity or we could have soil toxicity. The exclamation mark, sort of a catch-all, irritant, skin sensitizer, acute toxicity at times, could have narcotic effects, respiratory tract irritation, and hazardous to the ozone layer. In the HazCom, we're going to find out what are the effects of exposure. Are they acute or chronic? If it's an acute exposure, that means you're going to notice it right away. On the other hand, it could be chronic. It's going to take time for it to build up in your system. Again, we were talking about people working in the battery factory. There's lead everywhere. It gets into the skin. It gets absorbed in the body. It's breathed in. So little by little, it builds up in people. And they need to be tested for it. Now, routes of entry. We can breathe it in, we can swallow it. It can be soaked into the skin by absorption, or it could be injected. Needle or high pressure, we talked about hydraulic fluid a few weeks ago. We did have one instance where somebody put their hand on top of a lockbox, didn't have a glove on, and they ended up getting punctured by a hypodermic needle. So again, while we're working around chemicals, personal hygiene is something you should really be on top of. Wash your hands before and after using the restroom, before eating any food. Also, food and beverages should not be taken into production areas. Our fiber splicers know this. The little shards of glass that they're clipping away at could end up anywhere. So we don't want that to anybody to ingest those. And also, food and beverage around the work area could lead to pest infestations. If we look over at the right, here we have the 16 sections that all the safety data sheets are put into. We're going to go over each of these separately. We're going to skip 15 and 16 since they're just regulatory information. So let's go. So number one, identification. What's the product name? What else is it known as? I mean, you could have Windex and you could have Glass Sparkle. Even though they have different names, it's the same chemical. The description of what it looks like, the uses for it, the supplier identification, and the emergency number. Then number two, we have our hazard ID. This classifies it as how dangerous it is and what are the concerns, what are the hazards it presents. Then we're going to have the signal word. Again, the signal word is either warning or danger. Okay? And then the hazard statement about how this may affect you. It's going to be about the ingredients, the chemical name, common names, um, that, and also like the concentration. Number four is the first aid. What are you going to do until the responders arrive? What are the immediate and delayed symptoms? And on some chemicals, you may not realize it, but you may need to seek help immediately. And again, this is where you'll find that out. Firefighting. What do we do if there's a fire? How do we extinguish this? Again, you want to check to make sure that if it's a petroleum-based product, you're not using water to try to put it out. You'll just spread it around. So you know that can make things worse. Also, what information do the firefighters need to know? Again, some chemicals may be fairly safe by themselves, but when they start burning, they combine with other things, and they can become quite noxious. We need to know that. You need to warn the firefighters about it also. Number six is accidental release. What happens if something spills or leaks? We can't always just take something and pour it down the drain or let it go seeping into the storm sewer. Some of these things can affect the environment in a bad way. And then also, if that does happen, it will list who we're going to call to get this taken care of. I remember back when mercury was big on the EPA and OSHA list. Somebody had spilled a bottle of mercury in their basement of their home, and the cleanup was going to cost almost as much as the house was worth. So be careful with these chemicals. Handling of the product. What are you going to do to protect yourself and others? In some cases, you may need gloves. And when you're using it, maybe you need splash-proof goggles. Maybe you need to have good ventilation in the area when working with this product. It sort of ties in with number 8, exposure control or exposure. Always think of section 8. Anytime you go to use some new chemical, what is the proper PPE to use while working with this stuff? What are the permissible exposure limits, like when we talked about silica. Also, things like engineering controls. Maybe they have blowers or something to keep the ventilation in place. And then personal protective equipment. Do we need safety glasses? Do we need splash-proof goggles? Do we need chemical gloves? You know, whatever it might be, this is where you're going to find that information under Section 8, PPE. Properties of this chemical, what it looks like, what it smells like, the color, the viscosity, what it tastes like. I'm joking about that one, but that's where you'll find the chemical properties here. Number 10 is stability. Is it very reactive? Is the chemical stable? What is incompatible with this? If we were to take a potassium metal and mix it with water, that would be a very violent reaction. So you wouldn't want to mix those together. Other conditions to avoid, and I know I've done this to clean things up. You know, you want to get real clean, so you mix ammonia and bleach together. That is not recommended. That gives off a gas that is close in chemical content to mustard gas that they used in World War I. Section 11, toxicology info, how the chemical gets into your body. We talked about that, breathing it, inhaling it, absorbing it, ingesting it, and having it injected. So what happens when if this stuff is injected in you? What happens if you breathe this in? What are the signs and symptoms? Okay. Then ecological impact. What is it going to do to the environment? What's the effects on water and soil? So again, these are things that OSHA and the EPA want us to worry about. The chemicals safely. Sometimes we can recycle things. We should know where they're going to go, how we're going to get it there. There are other products that are so dangerous, so damaging that the container itself needs to be sent back to the manufacturer. Then we talk about transportation, how we got to classify it for shipping, any kind of special packaging, and any special precautions we need to take. Now, sections 15 and 16 are basically just regulatory information, and we're not going to get into that right now. So please be careful. Take a look at what the chemicals are. Remember, you need to know the signs, symptoms, and effects of whatever we're working with or around. Remember, we got your 6.